Hey there. So in this video, we are going to go over the plant guided notes. So this is starting on packet page 142, but then we will also use packet pages 144 and 145. So please make sure you have all three of those packet pages ready before you begin this video. So to start off with, plants have cell walls. And those cell walls are made of cellulose. So cellulose ends in ose, so we know that this is a sugar. Plants also are multicellular, meaning that they are made of more than one cell. Plants are made of millions and billions of different specialized cells. And plants also use sexual reproduction. They can use fragmentation or vegetative propagation as well, which are forms of asexual reproduction, in which an entirely new plant can be grown from just a single plant part, such as a leaf, a stem, or piece of the root. However, most plants will want to use sexual reproduction to reproduce, pollen and the egg, because remember, there are certain advantages to reproducing sexually versus reproducing asexually. So here we have an example of a fig tree stem that has been planted in soil, and they're growing new roots and shoots to regrow the fig tree. Plants also are eukaryotic, meaning that they have a nucleus, right? Any type of cell that has a nucleus is eukaryotic. Remember, the nucleus is where we store DNA. Plants are autotrophic, meaning they make food through the process of photosynthesis. And in order to do photosynthesis, plants need chloroplast. So that's this green bean-shaped organelle right here. So, oops, sorry, I clicked one too far. So plants will take in carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight energy into the chloroplast, and then they will make glucose, sugar, and oxygen. Now, the glucose has a couple of places that it can end up. Number one, it can be combined with another sugar called fructose in order to make cellulose, which will make up the cell wall. Or the sugar and the oxygen can make their way to the mitochondria, where the plant will perform aerobic cellular respiration in order to create ATP energy. Because remember, plants perform photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So they work twice as hard as animals who only perform cellular respiration. So down in the last kind of half of the plant guided notes, packet page 142, we're going to sketch out the plant classification. So kind of starting in the top middle, we're going to start with all plants. And then you'll just kind of create almost a pedigree, if you will. So we'll draw a line coming down from plants, moving way off to the left for non-vascular plants. These are also called bryophytes. And some examples of bryophytes are mosses. So all plants are divided into either non-vascular or vascular. So I've started with all plants, and then I just split far to the left for non-vascular, and then all the way to the right for vascular. Then I'm going to further subdivide vascular plants into seedless and seeded. Examples of seedless vascular plants are ferns. And then I'm going to subdivide seeded vascular plants again into gymnosperms and angiosperms. So gymnosperms are your conifers, meaning they have cones for seeds. So think of your Christmas tree, right? Pines, firs, spruces. And then the other seeded plants are angiosperms. So these are going to be any trees that have flowers or produce fruit. So grasses, maples, oak, and daisies. So all plants are divided into either non-vascular or vascular. Vascular is then divided again into seedless and seeded. And then seeded is again divided into gymnosperms and angiosperms. So if we need to, please pause the video here to make sure you've copied down the complete classification for all plants. So let's continue the plant guided notes and take a look at the types of plants. So this is where we're going to pick up with packet pages 144 and 145. So 144 and 145. So starting in the top left, we're talking about mosses. Remember, we said they are also known as bryophytes. Now, mosses are non-vascular, meaning they do not have xylem and phloem tubes to help transport water and nutrients from one spot to another. So there's basically no vascular system. Because of this, bryophytes tend to be very small, and they must use diffusion and osmosis to transport substances. So if we take a look at the moss here, right, they do not grow very tall. They can grow wide across, so this moss here is growing across this entire stump, but it is not growing very tall because every single cell needs to be able to get water and nutrients. And the only way we can do that is through passive transport. So the cells need to be very close together. Bryophytes tend to grow in moist, shady environments, and this is to help prevent them from drying out. Because again, they cannot get moisture across the entire structure because they don't have any vascular system in order to do that. So they grow in shaded, wet environments. Bryophytes need water to reproduce. They have flagellated sperm. And so they do reproduce sexually. So when sperm fertilize the eggs, and then you have spores that are released. Now, spores are very similar to seeds, but they're more primitive. So we still have sexual reproduction where we're mixing up the DNA with the egg and the sperm, but we create a spore. Below the mosses, we have ferns. Ferns are vascular, or if we flip back a page and take a look at our classification chart, vascular again, meaning that they do have xylem and phloem tubes in order to transport water and nutrients. Ferns have leaves called fronds. So that's what this structure right here is, a frond. And then they have stems that grow near or under the surface called rhizomes. Ferns also need water in order to reproduce. Ferns, although they are more evolved and more complex than mosses, they still have a very simple root system compared with gymnosperms and angiosperms. And ferns do reproduce sexually, similar to mosses, where they are going to use spores that are released into the environment in order to create more ferns. Up next, we have gymnosperms at the top right of our packet, page 144. The word gymnosperm, if we divide this up, gym kind of meaning naked, and then sperm meaning seed. So gymnosperms are naked seeds, meaning that they are not in a protective case. Gymnosperms are vascular, so they do have that xylem and phloem tubing, helping to transport water and nutrients throughout the entire structure. Gymnosperms have a true root system and stems and leaves. So what we are familiar with when we think of plants, when we think of trees. And gymnosperms do reproduce sexually using pollen, which is the sperm, to fertilize the egg. And of course, that process is pollination. In gymnosperms, the gametes grow in structures called cones, right, which are those naked seeds. So the embryos are contained within seeds. They do not need water to reproduce. Typically, gymnosperms, their seeds, because they are not encased within a fruit, they will rely on wind to pollinate, in order to spread their pollen in order to reproduce. So we can see here the wind is picking up the pollen, and then this pollen will hopefully go and land on another pine or spruce, and it will fertilize it, and then they will be able to reproduce. Last but not least, we have angiosperms. Angiosperms, meaning that the seed is enclosed in a case. So like angio means vessel. So angiosperms are vascular, so they do have the xylem and phloem tubes that can transfer water, nutrients throughout the plant system. Angiosperms, like gymnosperms, have true roots, stems, and leaves. And they reproduce through pollination, but it's a little bit different from the gymnosperms. In angiosperms, the gametes grow in a structure called the flower, and the embryos are contained within seeds that are in the ovule or the ovary, which, when it develops, becomes a fruit. So those of us that are eating fruit, like apples, right, we are eating the ripened ovary of a plant. So the female reproductive system is this main part right here, right? The ovule with all of the seeds or eggs inside. So ovary, the style, and the stigma up here, right, which makes up the entire structure called the carpel. So that is the female reproductive part of the flower. And then the male reproductive part is all of these smaller stamen that surround the carpel. So the stamen, and I can remember that this is the male reproductive part because it has the word men. The stamen is made up of two parts, the anther and the filament. So the anther is where the pollen is actually found. And then the filament is basically just a structure that holds the anther up into the flower so that hopefully if a bee or a bird comes by, in order to get nectar or get the fruit from the flower, they'll rub up against the anther, get the pollen on their feathers or their fur, and then they'll fly to another flower and they'll help cross-pollinate the flowers. The petals, they are secondary sexual organs where they basically just help to attract birds or bees or bats or other insects. So again, here's a close-up look. We have the carpel, right? This entire structure here for the female reproductive system. And then it is surrounded by the stamen, right? Which has the pollen, which is the male reproductive system. So the flower is the reproductive structure. Again, it's going to try to attract pollinators by either a specific scent, a color, or a pattern. And different scents, colors, and patterns will attract different pollinators. And then finally, you have this chart, which was packet page 145. and it was already filled in for you with these check marks. So as far as non-vascular plants go, that's just mosses. Remember, non-vascular means there is no vascular tissue, no xylem and phloem. Vascular plants are ferns, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. And these plants are characterized by the fact that they can actually grow tall, and they do not have to cover the surface of whatever they're growing on. They can actually grow up away because they have the vascular tissues in order to transport water, nutrients from the roots to the very top of the system. Seedless are moss and ferns. Remember, they are going to use spores in order to reproduce. Gymnosperms and angiosperms use seeds. Remember, the word sperm means seed. Cones are used by gymnosperms, right? Naked seed that's not enclosed in anything. And then, of course, flowers are used by angiosperms to help attract pollinators. And also the seed is enclosed in a fruit because the word angio means vessel. So the seed is enclosed in a vessel, which we call a fruit. So that is it for these notes on our plant guided notes, talking about plant classification and then the different types of plants. If you have any questions or concerns, please make sure to let me know. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Thanks.